Hi, you guys. Welcome back to the channel for those of you who are returning. If you are new here, visiting for the first time, thank you for stopping by. I'm Anita with Anita by Design, and here on my YouTube channel, you will find step-by-step, very detailed sew-alongs and tutorials to help you with your sewing projects. If you are new to sewing, if you've never sewn anything before, then I invite you to check out my beginner's sewing course here on my YouTube channel, where I walk you through the process of learning the basics of sewing. Today I am coming back with the Sewing with Baby Lock Soprano series, and I'm going to show you how to sew a buttonhole. And I know that for many in the sewing community, especially those who are new to sewing, that is a very intimidating technique. But today I'm going to walk you through the process. I'm going to show you how to prepare your fabric, how to measure for your buttonhole, how to sew the buttonhole, and I'm even going to show you how to open the buttonhole in a very quick and easy way that is precise and gives you a nice clean cut. So if you're ready, come join me and let's get started. Okay, first let's take a look at the items we're going to need to create our buttonhole. First, you're going to need your automatic buttonhole foot that comes with the Baby Lock Soprano. You're going to need a button, and the largest button you can use with the automatic buttonhole foot is 1¼ inch. Correction, the largest size button that will fit into the chamber of the automatic buttonhole foot is 1⅛ inch. You will need a fabric pen or pencil. You're going to need some interfacing to interface the area that you will be creating your buttonhole. You're going to need a small ruler. If you don't have a small ruler, you can use your seam gauge. Now let's take a closer look at the buttonhole foot. Here you will notice there is a metal pin, and this is where we attach the buttonhole foot to the sewing machine. Then you will notice these markings on the foot, and these are the markings that you use to line up the placement of the line that you will draw onto your fabric to create the buttonhole. Then here at the back is a sliding chamber, and this is what you will use to insert your button to create the buttonhole. So you will take your button, place it inside the chamber, and then close up the slider to fit around that button, making sure that it's closed tightly onto the button. Okay, before we can draw the lines onto our fabric to create the buttonholes, we need to measure the button. And this is the button I'm going to be using. And what we're going to do is measure from one end of the button across the center to the other end. And I'm going to use my seam gauge. And as you can see, this button measures 3/4 inch. Next, I want to show you a shank button. You would do the same thing, measuring from one end to the other, right below the shank. And this one also is 3/4 inch. Now let me show you a two-part self-covered button. This is one where you will cover the button with your fashion fabric to match the garment. So from the bottom side, we have two parts. This is the bottom portion of the button that will fit into this top portion to hold the fabric in place. So we're going to measure the top part of the button. Again, using the seam gauge, we're going to measure right across the center of that button below the shank. And as you can see, this button measures 7/8 inch. Now we need to prepare the fabric for the buttonholes. We will be sewing through 3 layers of fabric. What we have here is the outer layer. There is the facing and the interfacing that's attached to the facing. There are instances where you will not use interfacing, and an example would be if you've created a facing that is folded in half. So you will have 2 layers of facing, and then the third layer will be the outer fabric. Okay, so let's pretend we're sewing a shirt and we're going to add buttons and buttonholes to our shirt. So this is the finished edge of our shirt, and we need to make sure that we mark the center front line on the shirt. And if you're using a commercial pattern, then all of the lines have been mapped out for you, and all you have to do is transfer the lines onto your fabric. If you're not using a pattern, then you will need to locate the center front for your shirt and draw that line. Then you will draw the lines for your buttonhole. The button that we are using is 3/4 of an inch in diameter. We need to add 1/8 of an inch to that measurement to make our buttonhole. Now, what I have done is I've measured out. So the button is 3/4 of an inch. If you add 1/8 of an inch, that's 7/8 of an inch. So I've measured it out, and then I used a ruler, or before I draw the line, I measure it out, and I used my chalk roller to draw the end marks for the buttonhole. And then I used a ruler to go ahead and draw that line. Okay? Now you want to make sure that when you're creating a horizontal button, which is what we're working with here, that the line that you draw is perfectly perpendicular to the center front line. And what you can do is you can use a larger ruler and line up the edge of the ruler with the finished edge of your garment, and then you can draw that line, making sure that it's perfectly perpendicular to the finished edge and your center front line. That way your garment will button up and everything will line up perfectly. Make sure if you are sewing a vertical button that you measure the same way and create your line directly on that center front line. So you would start at the end of your seam guide and then measure over to 7/8 of an inch and draw the other line. If you are sewing a lady's garment, your buttonholes will be placed on the right front. If you're sewing a men's garment, they will be placed on the left front. Okay, I've chosen to sew stitch number 80, which is the narrow squared buttonhole stitch. So here from the LCD panel, I'm going to press the utility stitch button, and then I'm going to enter 80. And this is the buttonhole I will be sewing. And then all of the settings are automatically set, so I don't have to change anything there. The machine is all set to go. Okay, I have the button inside of the carrier on the buttonhole foot. Now we need to insert the buttonhole foot onto the machine. Okay, then there's a carrier in the back of the machine, and we need to pull that gray carrier down, and it needs to fit behind this plastic part here on the buttonhole foot. And now we're ready to sew the buttonhole. Before you insert the fabric under the presser foot, I want to show you how I line up my markings on the fabric with the markings on the buttonhole foot. The line for your buttonhole, I line that up with this center red marking here on the buttonhole foot. And then the horizontal line that begins the buttonhole, I line that up with the green and red marks on the side of the presser foot. When we insert the fabric, the stitching starts here near the finished edge of the garment, and it will sew a bar tack here, then sew up in this direction. It will sew another bar tack and then come back down and go up and around again. So I'm going to insert that and line it up with the markings. I'm going to use my hand wheel to turn down and make sure I'm hitting the mark. And when you begin sewing, the machine along with this presser foot will do all the work for you. And there we have our buttonhole. To open my buttonholes, I use two different products. I use Fray Check to prevent the buttonhole from raveling once it's been opened. And I use the buttonhole opener set. And this is by Meta, and this makes opening your buttonholes so much easier than the method I used to use, which is 2 pins on the end and then using a seam ripper to open it up. This gives you a nice clean cut, and it helps to prevent ripping the threads when you're opening the buttonhole. So what I do first is I take the fray check and I squirt it right within the opening of the buttonhole on both sides, and then I allow that to dry. Then I will take the pad that comes with the buttonhole opener set and put it under the buttonhole. And then I will use the blade and place it right in the center, making sure that I'm not placing it onto the threads. And then I will turn it up and rock it back and forth. And after I've cut that area, then I'll move it down to the other end, making sure I'm not cutting through the threads, and rock it back and forth. So I'll demonstrate that right now. Okay, and then I'll go down. And then this is what it looks like. Make sure that, now you see I didn't cut all the way through on that first round. So if that ever happens, you just take your blade and go back over it and cut through. And now your buttonhole is open. Well, that's it for today. I hope you're feeling a little bit more comfortable about sewing a buttonhole if you've never done one before. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more like this, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And when you do, hit the bell to the right of the subscribe button so that you will be notified when new content is posted here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.